television by Farnsworth and all that. Everybody was horrified by what happened to their inventions.
So Farnsworth, Farnsworth, the inventor of television, tell us about it.
Yeah, was just completely disgusted with what television turned into by the time he died.
He single-handedly invented
television.
Picture, the electronics, the sound, everything.
Everything. Well, that's the sound's something else. That's just radio.
Yeah.
But it was getting the image, transmitting the image.
I see.
They had to do it mechanically with discs, and they just couldn't get a decent TV picture. He figured out how to do it with an electron beam when he was in high school.
High school?
Yeah, he drew all the diagrams for his chemistry teacher. The guy testified later in court to prove that Farnsworth was the inventor of television. He actually did beat RCA. He was one of the only inventors that did. They cried. Their lawyer cried. RCA had never experienced that before.
Defeat.
Yeah, never. It's impossible. Farnsworth did it.
With time to spare?
Television. Yeah, so what they did is then they just blocked television so nobody could make it. Farnsworth, our Sarnoff could do that.
He blocked it.
He just made it so nobody, what he did is to make it so nobody would honor your patents or anything, and you couldn't build it, you didn't have enough money. No, they just decided, well, no one's going to make your television. And meanwhile, we're going to steal all the ideas and invent our own. It takes about 8 years. It's sort of. You got a fellow Russian, Sworkin, to come over to this country and then lie to Farnsworth that he was actually working for Westinghouse and was interested in his electronic scan, and then took all the ideas, and then him and RCA, they put a whole $1 million effort into coming up with their own television that could claim to be a different patent and get around Farnsworth, so that Farnsworth ended up with nothing.
Nothing?
Yeah. So Zorkin came up with the image orthicon, the image orthicon tube, and it was built on a different principle than the Farnsworth image dissector. So the patent office gave them a patent for it. So now RCA had its own television, and they managed to keep Farnsworth tied up in court and stop things from happening long enough that they invented their own television, figured out a way around it, because their principles were so damn basic. So then that beat Farnsworth. So he never really got anything out of television.
But he had another stroke of genius when he invented hot fusion?
No, the image converters, infrared and night scope tubes and all that shit for the military after the war. He invented all that. So he was the top guy.
Laser sights and night vision?
He had his own department in IT&T. He was a division of IT&T, and that's where he started his fusion work, which came out of the television multipactor tubes. They never found any practical, they were never practically developed. Thing, all his patents went to IT&T, so they said they owned this fusion, and he wasn't going to work on it anymore, and that was the end of that, and he had to leave.
So they shut down.
Yeah, it wasn't IT&T's intent. IT&T was enforced. The last thing they needed to do was lose Farnsworth. Farnsworth made them billions.
So RCA took Farnsworth out?
No, the Wall Street.
Wall Street.
Yeah. They were powerful enough that they said they could crash IT&T's stock. That's what they threatened to do. They threatened to crash IT&T's stock through rumors and and manipulation, unless they disbanded the fusion project. See, the people that are against Iran and Farnsworth and all the rest of this stuff is the Atomic Energy Commission. They want everything to be uranium and fission.
Toxic.
Yeah, and all that kind of. Well, the thing is they worship that stuff.
Yeah, it's a religion.
It's a religion. Mm-hmm. It's like a death worship. It's a worship of death. Is what it is.
So, Farnsworth perfected the method.
Well, it kept burning out after about 5 minutes. He didn't perfect it.
Okay, but he could have.
Well, it worked.
It worked.
He did put out electricity.
large quantities of electricity, 100,000 watts for 5 minutes.
How much energy went into creating this little, what was it inside the tube that made this fusion possible?
It was the way that the force fields were developed. The tube is empty. He could create virtual electrodes.
Virtual electrodes?
Yeah, so he created concentric shells of virtual anodes and cathodes, and they, all phased everything to where, the intensity would get higher and higher the more and more you got to the center, and then, the little star would appear in the center, and out would come the electricity. Okay.
So he created a little star in the center?
Yeah, in the center.
So he called
it a quasar.
A quasar?
Yeah, that's based on a mathematical equation. What Farnsworth found is normally if you take a piece of space, is all the electrons going in is equal to the number of electrons going out. So it's called a differential equation type situation. They call it divergence. So everything goes in equals what goes out. So there's no source of electrons in the space. It's empty. So if 1 million electrons are going into space, 1 million electrons are going out, and the net electrons are zero. But what Farnsworth found when the star appeared in his multipactor is the amount of electrons leaving the space was greater than those aneroids.
Wow.
Where did they come from? That was the big problem. So all of a sudden, here's electrons coming from nowhere. So that kind of, created a complication for everybody's way of thinking. So he developed that, to the point where it would also do it with neutrons, so he could get a fusion reaction. So more electricity could come out of the space than went into it. Yeah. What's that? Well, he had a name for it. He called it, the physicists called it, some guy who did a lot of studying of the electron. I don't know how to pronounce all these Polish names. It's D-I-R-A-C is how you spell the guy's name.
Dirac.
Yeah. They called it the Dirac sea. It's this counter space that electrons can come from.
Counter space.
Yeah. Well, they don't talk about it like that. But that's what it is. It's coming from another space. Farnsworth figured out that's how the sun works. The power comes from another space, not inside the sun. It's from somewhere else.
It's channeling from another dimension?
Well, that's the way the physicists like you to talk.
How do you like it?
We don't use dimensions. So it's either another coordinate system or another space or another time or, but I don't like to call it different dimensions.
Okay.
That confuses the mind.
Yeah.
It's only one dimension of space. You can't say 3D space or 4D space. That doesn't make any sense. There's only one dimension of space. Space. And when you think about it like that, then you can have space and you can have counter space, because they're both in the dimensions of space. 3D space and 2D space, and those things are just mathematical. Those are coordinate systems or mathematical abstractions. You can have any number that you want. It's arbitrary. But they force the whole mind state to think like that. That way you only think in terms of graph paper. You don't think in terms of generalized coordinate systems. And then when you get into this three-phase math, like I've been working on in that book, you see then all of a sudden you have a whole different type of coordinate system. 9 dimensions, according to the physics world. You have 9 dimensions in time, which is only 1 dimension in time because they're all frequencies of 60 cycles a second. But some turns forward and some turns backwards and some don't turn at all. So you have 9 components altogether. So algebraically, normally you can't, too complicated. You have 9 simultaneous equations. It's too complicated. You can't apply it to practical problems. You must have to spend all day dealing with, matrix algebra, which nobody likes. So this guy that came up with that book, in that paper, he figured out a way to do it all geometrically. So he didn't need 9 dimensions. Reduced it to 2. Yeah.
The sacred geometries that come back in that.
Well, no, but there's a 5-phase system all applies to sacred geometry, but there is no existing 5-phase system. Your book does not develop that mathematics, but it gets you started on it. It gives you just enough that you can carry it to other coordinate systems. It takes a lot of figuring.
Have you gotten further?
Yeah, I've started. I'm almost about ready to write a paper on the book, but I don't, see any point in it. I'm not really interested in anything anymore, anyway.
When you were 15 years old in your lab, did you also create or accidentally happen upon Philo T. Farnsworth's star within a vacuum?
Well, that's what Philo thought, when I told him that when we were, playing Nuclear Meltdown, it was wiping out all the radar reception at Hamilton Air Force Base.
You were 15.
What's that?
You were 15.
All this stuff happened about the age of 17.
Okay.
I started building the lab about 15. Took 2 years to build it.
In your home?
Yeah. It's a lot of work. Everything made from scratch.
So the highlight was you actually created a star in a vacuum.
Well, we didn't see that. It was on the elements, it was too bright.
But you felt the power.
Well, the thing is the RF came out of it. That's when Philo, found out that when I explained to him, well, he understood that the thing was producing microwaves, and that, in all probability, there was some kind of fusion reaction going on in the tube. And then actually on YouTube, people are doing experiments with just little vacuum tubes with some gas in them, and they're already getting neutron counts out of these things without anything complicated at all.
Really?
Yeah, just using a simple multipactor geometry.
Koreans have done this.
No, I'm seeing people on YouTube, they got their radiation detectors, and these things are going into runaway neutron, which is the beginning of fusion. That's how you determine is all of a sudden you get this wild neutron count. You don't want to be standing around that. So you have to use a type of hydrogen that has neutrons that don't belong in hydrogen. Hydrogen is not supposed to have neutrons. So you have 1 neutron, you can have 2 neutrons, and you can have, I think, 3 neutrons. So the tritium is the 3 neutron one, or whatever, that is preferred. And then, when Farnsworth when IT&T gave him the jam, they also would not supply him with any more heavy hydrogen gas. You do experiments, yeah. You can't just use regular hydrogen. You have to use hydrogen that's got neutrons on it, which is not natural. It's toxic. So if you have water that that's based on a hydrogen with neutrons in it, it's very unhealthy to drink. It doesn't act like water either.
Is that heavy water?
They call it heavy water.
Oh.
So the Germans were going the heavy water route, which would indicate that their atomic process was going to be fusion and not fission.
So their atomic process would be creative and explosive rather than explosive.
Well, it all explodes. That's the whole thing. It all explodes if you want to use it to make a bomb. But the electron tube end of it is not a bomb. It's to make electricity. You don't want the thing to blow up. And it can't blow up. It's self-stabilizing.
It is self-stabilizing.
Yeah, self-stabilizing. It will burn itself out. It won't keep going to run away like that. It'll just short itself
So
out.
it's very safe by nature.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, just a little more research, a little more...
Well, Farnsworth just couldn't, get the insulation in the tube to hold up.
But nowadays...
Well, I don't know. And, that's a whole... He had to develop his own system of electron optics and mathematics, and he was like Tesla. He would have wrote books, that would have helped a lot. Same thing with Farnsworth, this stuff's all lost. That's harder to recover than Tesla, because that was very mathematical, and a lot of complicated mathematics involved Farnsworth stuff, where Tesla's stuff is more experimental.
You feel that Farnsworth mathematics was fusion?
Well, yeah, I had access initially to all his notebooks.
From his family?
From Philo, yeah, it was in the house.
So...
They vanished somewhere. I don't know where. No one could find them. They were hardbound and typed up. There was It was as long as this whole countertop here. Hardbound, typed up notebooks of all of his electron tube research up to the fuser.
They gave you these notebooks?
Well, I had free access to them.
Why? Why would somebody give you free access
Well,
to them?
because, the family adopted me. I lived with those people.
So you
Yeah, and Philo invited me in to get drunk with him, out of the bushes, and he wanted to brag. The typical MIT mentality. He wanted to brag. So, we compared sea stories. And then one of mine was too good. And it upset him.
Which one?
The one about nuclear meltdown
In your
in the parents' garage.
17.
Yeah, then he got the idea, because that related to his father's stuff. So that he was going to one-up me by showing me the tubes, that he was absolutely assured I had no idea how they worked. Well, he was assured wrong.
You just have one look.
Then when I knew there was a star in the tube, before he even said it, then that changed the whole thing. He choked. Became a whole different person after that. So then I was like adopted into the deal. There was no, he couldn't understand because I was too young to know anything about that. How I could. He asked me how old. He kept asking me how old are you? I looked confused. He goes, how old are you? How would you know about something that was built in the 1930s? Well, the whole RCA station was built in the 1930s. That's why.
Where you worked previously.
Well, I didn't work. That's where. Yeah, and I always had a place to listen to the music because I was involved, with recording studios and musicians, and my friends are all musicians, and so I always had a hole with, some contact to the Bach, and that's when Philo got me started on the mathematics. So I was living in the bushes next to his house.
You were living next to Philo Farnsworth's house?
Yeah, David used to tell me about him, and then I found out that's why David was so smart, because Philo was tutoring him at a very young age, and that's why David had an aptitude for all this stuff as a deranged kid that smokes weed in the bushes, abandoned by his parents.
David,
my buddy David Franklin. We were, like an indivisible team for decades.
So he introduced you to Philo, or you just...
Well, he told me about Philo, and Philo was insane. Because Commonweal had been harassing him to get him off the school board, and he married a wife that was part of Commonweal, and they really hounded that guy, and he was an alcoholic, and the whole Farnsworth family was a tragedy because of the disaster that happened to the father, the television, and the whole thing.
This guy was not Philo, it was his son.
Son, yeah.
His son.
So Philo Farnsworth, they're all named Philo.
Oh, the second.
Yeah, he's Philo Farnsworth Jr.
Okay.
Philo Taylor Farnsworth III.
He's the third?
Yeah, they just call him Junior. He's the third. They just call him Junior. The first Farnsworth has no significance. He's just a Mormon pioneer in the Civil War days.
The second was the guy who invented
television. Yeah.
So
the third is his son.
Okay.
So the old man had just died in '72 or whatever, and I ran across. I was living in the bushes outside Philo's house, and David told me, the guy, says his father invented television and all that, and then he's crazy, and it's probably best not to go try to talk to him.
And you did, of course.
Well, it was an accident, because I was living in the bushes outside his house. One day, Philo came out and invited me in. He knew that I was from RCA, and the family hated RCA because RCA, destroyed his father's ability to gain the invention of television and wiped out Armstrong and did all kinds of horrible stuff to inventors. And here I'm RCA's golden boy, so he didn't know quite how to deal with me. But he invited me inside, and he wanted to drink and smoke, and I was destined. That was very welcome.
Yeah.
So I go in, and the guy's that typical MIT asshole. All he wants to talk about is how much he knows and everything, and I can't get a word in edgewise, but the story's interesting.
Yeah.
So we were all drunk and stoned, and we started braggarting off to each other. So he told me how he got into MIT when he was 15 years old without his parents or the high school knowing about it. You know, he was proud of the story, and mine was only RCA. I didn't know I had to one-up him. So at any rate, I told him about nuclear meltdown in my parents' garage and how it blacked out the radars at Hamilton Air Force Base. And then the guy like shut up all of a sudden and started looking at me real funny, and he was all pissed because he couldn't beat the story. So he goes and runs back into the whole house is crazy man's house, you know, packed with books and garbage, and you can hardly walk, you know, and the whole thing. And he goes into his hole, pulls out some rotten cardboard box, and it has all these crazy tubes in it that his father made. And he goes, "You're so smart, you tell me how these tubes work." So I pull the things out and I look at them. You know, I've touched every tube in existence. I had it on my bench in my parents' garage. Every tube in existence, from traveling wave tubes to magnetrons to ignitrons, I don't care what they were. I had every tube on that bench and I made it operate. I'd never seen a tube like any of these. Really? But I'd seen camera tubes and other Farnsworth tubes. So I'm looking at the things and I start to figure out how they work. Philo doesn't like that. Okay, and then I see one, and the glass was all blackened on the inside from the X-rays. But the electrodes weren't big enough to substantiate that kind of power flow. And it had been broken off. It was experimental to a neck, and it was broken off. It had no vacuum in it anymore. So I'm looking at this thing, and I go, "Philo, what happened in this tube?" And he gets all like weird with me. You know, "Well, why are you asking this and that?" And I go, "Well, Philo, something took off in this tube. What happened in this tube?" He goes, "Well, how do you know that?" I go, "Well, look at it."
Something took off.
Yeah, something took off. Tell me, Philo, what took off in the tube? So finally, he backed out of this whole thing, and he told me that his father had created his first star inside that vacuum tube. And then he laid the whole thing out to me. And the family adopted me at that point. And I had free access to all the notebooks or tubes or anything I ever wanted. Then Commonweal broke into the house and stole all the original television tubes, but they didn't get the other ones. I think they're packed away in Salt Lake or somewhere. Most of the family's gone now.
So he showed you this star tube,
Yeah.
and you figured it out. And this was the genesis of the whole cosmic induction generator.
Well, that's what I was doing at the same time. So he invited his mother, the wife of the inventor, to Utah. They came out and they went to our K-Lab in David's bedroom, and they saw the galaxy and the light bulb. And that was it. The Farnsworth family adopted me right at that point. You know, here the old man has spent a whole life, you know, custom designing vacuum tubes to get this effect, and here's some crazy kids that smoke dope with a bunch of transformers and stuff hanging on the wall in this bedroom, and we're doing this stuff in burned out street lights out of dumpsters for fun, terrorizing the neighborhood. The TV interference and the lights flashing on and off in everybody's houses at night. It's like the UFOs were landing. PG knew what was going on. They would have shit all over themselves.
You're making stars and burns out streetlight lamps. Oh, that's too much, man. What am I going to do?
Well, that's what the Farnsworth family thought, you know. I mean, they were so high in their horse about all this, and here, you know, is this crazy Jewish kid and this insane, you know, electronics technician from RCA that hated RCA, and they're making galaxies in old burned out streetlights with some kind of Tesla transformer made out of old RCA parts.
Wow.
You know, we were doing it because it was fun.